Well, here we are in another lockdown, and probably languishing. How fortuitous it is then that the topic of today's conversation is languishing. And so I now invite Dr. Francis Macnab and Rev Dr Steven Koski to commence that conversation and let us see where it goes. I hope you all enjoy it. Over to you, Steven.
So great to see you and to be with you again and to have the chance to continue our conversation. So Melbourne is in lockdown, so it just seems like in many ways and many places, it seemed like there was a light at the end of the tunnel, only to discover it's just another train. So Melbourne is in lockdown. Here, it seemed like things were more hopeful, and our local hospital is at full capacity, and there are absolutely no beds. The ICU is completely full. So we're still in that in-between time. The world that we once knew is no longer, but we're not yet to what is yet to come. So I read this article in the New York Times that I think gave a name to what so many are feeling after 15 months or something of COVID. The article was by Adam Grant, and it was titled, "There's a Name for This Blah That You're Feeling." And it's called languishing. And he said that languishing is this sense of stagnation, this sense of emptiness. It's not burnout, because you still have some energy. It's not quite depression, because we don't feel completely hopeless. We just feel muddled, kind of joyless, aimless. He said we're surviving, barely, maybe. We're hanging on, we're surviving, but we're definitely not thriving. So the article said, languishing is the void between depression and flourishing. It's an absence of well-being. You don't necessarily have symptoms of mental illness, but you're not the picture of mental health either. You're just not functioning at full capacity. What he said, you just feel blah. So he said that one of the best ways of managing this is to name it. Just name it. I mean, I was talking with someone yesterday, and she said to me, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I'm just not myself. I'm not myself today. I just feel out of it. I'm really struggling. And I thought, what's wrong with us? What's wrong with us that we feel like we have to apologize for being human? I mean, she apologized that life is really hard. So I said to her, you don't have to apologize. Life is hard right now. I mean, it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It doesn't mean something's wrong with you. It just means life is hard. So I'm curious if one of the best ways to deal with this feeling of languishing is to own it, to name it. And I'm curious whether that will take some of the power away from it. And I'm also curious whether that will also give others permission to say, you know what? Me too. You know, I know that feeling. I feel that feeling. Someone said the closest distance between two people are two words. Me too. You know, I'm feeling the same thing that you're feeling. So I'm curious, Francis, what do you think of this term languishing? do you feel like it describes what people are experiencing now that we're 15 months into this COVID experience? Would you have another word?
Well, I don't think we need another word. We know what you're talking about. I think the real alternative issue is to say, what do we do about it? How can we take this feeling on board and do something about it so that we can feel better? I think the alternative to languishing is to feel better about ourselves, better about other people, better about the life we're living. How do we feel better? So what do we do about that? I think the first thing we can do is do what we're doing now, connecting. To connect with other people, to somebody else, connect and say hello. We're connecting and we're communicating. There are 2 or 3 C words, if you like: to connect, to communicate, to care. All those possibilities are before us that can lift us out of the languishing state to be something else, to do something about it. Is that any help?
Yeah, I think I think you're right on. I'm curious too, whether in order to connect with someone else, we also kind of need to connect with ourselves. We need to kind of connect with what's going on in our own inner lives. I mean, the article even suggests that when you're languishing, one of the best things you can do is just one simple way to care for yourself. To ask yourself, well, what's one thing you can do that would express self-care? It's sort of like when on the airplane, for the 2 of us who actually listen to the flight attendant when they do the little spiel at the beginning, and the flight attendant says, if the plane hits turbulence and the oxygen masks drop, put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you help others. And sometimes we think self-care is selfish. And I think self-care, in some ways, when we take the time to care for ourselves, it's actually a way of caring for others, because those are the lives that we're going to touch. So when you actually find a way to lift yourself up so that you then connect with others, you're going to connect with others in a really different way. I've shared before, I've talked a little bit about when my wife was so sick in the ICU. And I remember one time when the nurse said to me, I was languishing in the corner of this hospital room. And she said, Stephen, you've been awake for 36 hours. You look terrible. You look exhausted. And she said, the best thing you can do right now is go get rest, stretch, exercise, listen to some good music, eat something nourishing. And she said, then come back tomorrow morning with your best self, refreshed, renewed. And I remember it so vividly. She said, your wife right now in her healing doesn't need your languishing, doesn't need your weariness and your worry. She doesn't need your anxiety and your fear. She needs your best self. She needs you to feel the fullness of your strength and to bring a positive energy into this room. So I'm curious, when we're languishing, that maybe I'm wondering if self-compassion might be one of the best tools that we can have in our backpack for the journey. What do you think about self-care?
I think it's very, very important to, it's a way of, in addition to connecting with other people, to connect with yourself. What are you feeling? What are you doing with yourself? Connect with yourself. Care for yourself. And your words just a moment ago, come back to yourself. Come back. That's very critical, because you can lose who you are, where you're going. So it's to connect with yourself, to come back onto yourself, to say, what do I feel? What can I do about myself right now?
Right.
So what can you do?
You know, I love how you phrased this, come back to yourself. I was actually leading a workshop today, and I invited them to do an exercise to begin. I talked about, you know, let's make the transition from getting here, you know, all that you were doing this morning, all of the activity that you were a part of, to be here. There's a huge difference between getting here and being here. So I asked them to just pay attention to where they feel any stress or tension. I said, lower your shoulders from your ears. You know, loosen the tension in your jaw. I know for me, you can see the lines between my eyebrows. You know, that's where I hold my tension is, you know, I said, well, loosen that space between the eyebrows. And I said, oftentimes we hold our tension, we hold our languishing in our chest, where our breathing is shallow and tight. So I said, well, take a moment and take 3 deep breaths. And imagine your breath dropping from your chest to 2 inches behind your navel. And then I said, put your hand on your heart and just ask yourself, where are you right now? Are you here? Are you somewhere else? And I said, ask yourself, what do you need? What do you need physically? What do you need emotionally? What do you need spiritually? What do you need relationally? And what is one way that you can express self-care? So in some ways, as you said, come back to yourself. When you said that, I realized that's what I was actually asking people to do. I didn't realize it or put it in that language. I was actually asking them to come back to themselves.
And to take it just a tiny step further, to be present, to be present to yourself. How do we become present to ourselves? Because often we're all over the place, thinking of something else, worrying about the other person, worrying about something. Instead of saying, how can I be present to this moment? How can I be present to myself? First of all, because if I'm present to myself, I've got something to give to the other person. I've got something to be there about. We're present to each other. If we're not present, we're talking over each other, talking to somebody else. How to be present to myself. Can we do that?
Yeah, I think sometimes just simply connecting to your breath can do that. Thomas Mertens said, every day there are 1,000 things that distract us and take us away from where we really are. And he said, what if we didn't think of those things as distractions or annoyances or things that cause us stress? What if we thought of those things as invitations to return? You know, to return to the heart, to return to the center, to return to being present. And I've always found that kind of helpful, rather than chasing that rabbit down that rabbit hole and get all distracted and stressed. just see it as an invitation to return to your center, to being present, so that you can be present to others. What helps you do that?
I think to take your words before, looking at yourself and recognizing what you're doing to yourself. Being present means to breathe differently. Being present means to just sit for a while and say, here I am. This is me. How can I be present to myself so that I might be more fully present to you and that you might be more fully present to me? So it's again and again, it's being present to each other rather than talking over each other or talking away from each other. Being present to ourselves, being present to the other person.
And it's amazing when you experience someone who is really present to you. And particularly someone who has kind of a non-anxious calmness about them. It can just really shift the energy.
In fact, the energy changes.
Yeah.
As soon as we breathe differently, as soon as we're present in a different way, the whole energy flowing between us changes. The energy in ourselves changes. So it's that change of energy is so critical to us as we live with ourselves and as we live in relationship to each other.
Yeah. One of my favorite stories, I'm always moved by it, is this father and son. His wife, the son's mother, died of cancer, and they were returning home from the funeral from the cemetery, and the son was 5 years old, and the father was anything but present. I mean, his mind was all, what's happened, now what, lost in his grief, anything but present. And it was maybe 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and he didn't know what to do but go to bed. So he brought his 5-year-old son into bed with him, and the son, and he kind of turned his back on his son, and his mind was just filled with everything the mind would be filled with. That's at such a time of immense grief. And the son was just really, really restless, and his energy was really anxious and frightened. And then finally, this 5-year-old son, now the dad's back was turned to him. And the 5-year-old said, "Daddy, if you turn your face towards me, I think I can go to sleep." And it kind of startled the father to be present. And he turned his face to his son. And the way the father described it is he placed his forehead on his son's forehead. And they just kind of matched their breath. He kind of slowed his breath down, and he kind of breathed in the same rhythm of his son. And within 30 seconds, his son was fast asleep. Somehow his 5-year-old son invited him to be present. And when he became a presence of love to his son experienced peace. And the father experienced peace and connection with his son. I always find that just such a powerful story and a powerful way that we can be present to each other, particularly in difficult times.
It's really to say, look at me. That's what he was saying. Look at me. Be present to me. And as we're present, we can now talk to each other in a different way from what we were thinking and doing before. So look at me, be present to me, talk to me differently.
I was really struck by something you wrote when you created the vision of Mingery, the quiet place. And you talked about Mingery as being a quiet place in the midst of the chaos, confusion, and trauma. a place where people can rest. But then you also said not just rest, but be restored. So when I think of people languishing, I think we not only need rest to quiet our anxious minds, but we also need to be restored. And you said it's a place to find the courage to let go of what is past and to walk and find the strength to walk towards the future. Because I think that's what healing is. As I think about this in-between time we're in, healing's not going back. We will not go back to the way things were. There'll be no returning to normal. I think healing is actually being open to what can be, kind of stepping to a new strength. And you wrote, Mingary is a place to breathe out the airs of anxiety and breathe in the airs of courage. So if people can't make it to St. Michael's, if they can't make it to Russell Street and actually find themselves in the presence of that beautiful, quiet place called Mingary, how can we find our own Mingary?
It's a very important issue that you raise. How to be really present and quiet to ourselves so that we can be open. In fact, again, you use those very words, being open to the flow of something into ourselves, being open to the possibility of being alive to life in a different way, being open to the flow of life. So it's not only, what do I say, closing ourselves off from the stresses, but being open to the healing, being open to the moment of being present with its reconnection and its re-strengthening, being open to it. Many people hear us talk about places like Mingary, the quiet place that we can sometimes go to as a place out there. But how is it possible to create our own Mingary for ourselves, within ourselves, a quiet place within? How can we do that? We've already mentioned the importance of being present, the importance of breathing differently, the importance of moving the anxious things of our life to one side for a moment and giving ourselves the chance to really be in the moment. And in that moment, to realize many things are being given to us. We're being given that moment and how to cherish that moment, absorb it, allow it to be there, to care and to connect with ourselves and to care for ourselves in a more positive way.
Then I'm curious whether we then do that full circle as to where you started us. I'm curious if we experience that centeredness, that inner strength when we connect with others, when we also experience that care for others. I recently spent time with a woman who was incredibly active in just a numerous amount of volunteer activities, and she felt like her life mattered. She had a sense of meaning and purpose. She felt like, she was making a difference. And that all came to a stop because of significant health concerns that confined her to her bed most of the time. And she began to kind of struggle with depression. She had this sense of languishing. She lost a sense of meaning and purpose. So we talked about, how might she find a renewed sense of purpose in spite of her limitations? I asked her, I think, a really important question to confront languishing, which is, what do you care about? What do you care deeply about? What are the things in the world that break your heart? But what are also the things that make your heart glad? I don't know if you remember, Frederick Buechner said, our calling in life is where life's brokenness meets our heart's deep gladness. So this woman really lost all of her mobility. She couldn't get out of bed. She couldn't get out of the house. But what she didn't lose, when I asked her what she cared most deeply about, what she never lost was her passion for youth, her passion for young people. She served as a mentor for many young people, and she never lost that sense of passion. And what was interesting, when I invited her to return to what she cared deeply about, the energy of that, even though she's confined to a bed. So this woman would write personal notes to young people just to encourage them. I'm not sure how it is in Melbourne, but death by suicide for young people in this area is epidemic. And this woman, even though she's confined to a bed, she has found this kind of renewed lease on life, just simply by focusing her energy, connecting young people. And what I love about that is she didn't kind of resign or accept that her story was over. Instead, she adapted. In many ways, in this next chapter in her life, she discovered a new and a different life story. And as she began to kind of reach beyond her bed, reach beyond her house, began to connect with young people, she discovered a renewed sense of her own worth, if you like, a new energy. I mean, I know you say in your book, Aging Well, go ahead.
Do you hear her listening to herself in a different way and realizing that she can bring from within herself some healing to other people, some healing to herself? So by listening to herself, she discovers there is a healing, what do I call it, a healing presence for herself that she can bring to others. And she can actually talk to others about herself in a different way. We can all do that. We can all have a fairly tough pathway ahead of us, but then we can discover that there is healing around us. There is healing within us. There is healing between us as we talk to each other. And so that can be a different way of coping with whatever we feel is on our plate at the moment.
What you're saying reminds me of the words of Henry David Thoreau, who said, life is heartbreaking. You can't avoid it. Life is heartbreaking. And he said, the remedy of a broken heart is to love still and to love more. So he said, life is going to break your heart. And the remedy of that is to actually love more.
And we could just add a little word of our own to that and say, to be open to that new strength, to be open to that love, if you like, because it's so easy to close ourselves off.
Yeah.
Don't let that renewed energy get through to us, but to be open to it. How can we be open to it? By sitting quietly there for a moment and listening, waiting, being hopeful that a word will come, that a new light will dawn, a new avenue will be there for us. So to be open to that possibility is so very powerful.
You know, that reminds me of, there's actually a sign as you enter this hospital in Indiana. It's large. And the sign says, take responsibility for the energy that you bring into this space. Your words matter. Your behaviors matter. Our patients matter. Our team matters. So take a deep breath and check your energy and make sure you're bringing the right kind of energy into this space. Can you imagine if that sign was in front of every building?
Yes, yes. Imagine too, of not only what energy you're bringing into this place, but being open to that energy.
Yeah.
Be open to it, because you can be a different person as you open yourself to that energy. That's good. Good words.
Well, again, it's just always a delight. I mean, to me, I've been languishing a little bit, and just connecting with you again has renewed my energy, and I really appreciate it. It's a real gift, and so thank you.
Well, there's a mutuality there too, as coming and going and going and coming. It's very powerful. The human energy is a renewing energy if you let it be so.
So my hope is that somehow this tunnel and the light at the end of the tunnels eventually will no longer be a train, and I can get myself on a plane and we can actually have this conversation in person.
Very good. Graham, what do you think?
I think it'd be fantastic to have both together and giving these conversations. You have been terrific today, both of you. Thank you very much. If I could sum up in the opening, I think a very good definition of languishing was given. If I can quote from here, it's not quite depression. We don't feel completely hopeless. We're just muddled, joyless, aimless, surviving, not thriving. And I think you've done very well right through. The things that stood out to me was the me too. By being able to say to somebody else, me too, immediately forges a connection with that person, and that has to be helpful. Self-care. I've made a note, self-care is most important. Take time out. Find your own quiet place by putting your cares and worries aside, and then just enjoy the quiet moment. And lastly, be prepared to reinvent yourself. Find what you are passionate about, and then do something about that passion. Again, gentlemen, thank you very much. And I hope that all you viewers have enjoyed the conversation between Dr. Francis Macnab and Rev Dr Steven Koski today. Thank you and bye.